Alright, we've only got one option left for the next mission. So, occupy factory it is. I mentioned that, for me at least, these stages aren't as hard, like this and the next few after it. There's still some tricky stuff, but in my experience it's the kind of things that get really consistent with practice. So, if it seems tough at first, just keep at it. You'll get it, no problem, eventually. First thing we're going to want to do is get damage boosted forward by this thing, preferably. The setup I use is to dash to, like, around here, a little bit before that square on the ground. And then I do 2 full hops. That'll put me around on the top right corner of that enemy. There's something weird about him. Sometimes he'll push you to the left, even if it looks like you're definitely on the far side. It's not a huge deal either way. I think it's like a 0.1 second difference. But we're also going to want to change our equips. This stage has a really unique loadout that you want to be using, but we need to pause to activate that Cyber Elf that we equipped a long time ago anyways, so we can just change our items and turn the elf on a long time before we actually need it. There's no RNG manipulation for this stage either, so having that Cyber Elf out, not a problem. Normally I do the pause here as I'm about to hit the jump. That's just my personal preference. You want the Buster, the Triple Rod, and then you activate the elf. You have to activate the elf last because it automatically kicks you out of the menu when you do that. And if I notice that I didn't really pause at the right time, I can adjust my movement accordingly. Like I paused a little bit early here, so after the first jump I'll move forward a little bit. Overreacted though. You'll also see me start charging the Buster here. We don't need it for a little bit, so you can charge it some other time. I like to just start doing it right there at the pause menu. So with this damage boost, we can get past this guy no problem. And then there's a pretty innocuous but critical step here, where I jump. Pretty substantial jump. Doesn't have to be full height. That's to get something on a better cycle a little bit later. And then you'll also see me stopping my movement for a bit. That's because this guy we want to pogo off is really far away. I think it's theoretically possible to bounce off of it without stopping, but it is unreasonably difficult and wouldn't even save much time because of the next cycle that we would have to wait for anyway. So you want to go as far forward as you can within reason before doing a full hop off here, and then go for a bounce off this guy. Make sure to hold jump still so you get all the way up to here. Then climb up. Then we have to dash to the left, pretty substantial distance, like around to that line in the background. Then we go up and over above this bomb and do a pogo off of that. That bomb oscillates up and down on a cycle. If you don't do that jump I mentioned earlier, the bomb will actually be pretty high up and you'll have to wait for it to come down. By doing that jump we load it early, so it starts its cycle and ends up at a very favorable position right when we're getting up here. And that'll put us on top of this silo. Let's check it out once more. These pogos are a little bit tricky, but once you get them, they get quite consistent. Now there's a couple bombs coming up here, and you can't really jump between them right away. The cycle's not favorable. You could shoot them down from a distance, but then you would have to wait for the explosion. And when I timed it, it was a little bit worse than just pausing a moment and then jumping in between them. Though it would depend on how optimal your timing is. If your jump is really well aimed, you'll be able to fit through earlier in their cycle. But getting hit by them is pretty bad, since health is actually a really valuable resource on this stage. We need a lot of it for optimal boss strats, so I would lean towards taking it safe on these things. And then here's where we're going to use that charge shot. There's a wall coming up we need to destroy. Normally it would take 4 hits with a triple rod, but if you hit it with a charge shot and 2 lemons, it will only take 3 hits. And then we'll just spin. I'm not very good at getting 3 hits on a single spin, so I go for 2 hits and then finish it off as I jump through with a third. These fans take 2 hits each, so they're not too bad. Getting this one while also making the jump onto that ledge can be a little tricky. I don't really have any tips for it though. Just practice it. Be careful not to go too far to the left when you're spinning. Just be quick with the D-pad movement. And then there's another wall here. I don't think you really have enough time to shoot it, so I just hit it 4 times with the triple rod. I mean, you would be able to fit the shots in, but they would delay when you would start the triple rod attack, so I don't think it's worth it. And then we start another charge. Charge shots move faster than lemons, so they're better for hitting the button for the elevator as early as possible. Be careful not to start a new charge right after you release this one. I do that out of habit sometimes, and you risk hitting the elevator button a second time, causing it to start going up instead of down, which is obviously not ideal. It is possible to fire that shot too early, and the button won't even be loaded by the time the buster gets over there. So when I'm around underneath that column that's attached to the ceiling, as I'm going past that, or a little bit earlier, you can fire the green shot and it'll hit the button. Once the elevator's low enough, dash through here. Your hitbox is shorter, so you'll be able to get through faster than if you were walking. And then just drop. Move forward once you move past that corner. That was pretty sloppy. Could have started moving forward a few frames earlier than that, but it doesn't make a huge deal. And then just get up here and fall in the spit. After falling in the pit, our cyber elf will pick us up, and you can kind of float around with it. It can be kind of weird to get used to doing this, just because it's so much different from anything else in the run, but it's really not tricky. Basically, you just want to push up against this wall, and then go straight up from there. So after you hit the pit, hold up and left until you're on the wall, and then just straight up. Don't continue holding up and left, or else you'll go over here. And then it runs out after some time, pretty much right before you're hitting that gap in the wall. And then you just time a wall jump as it runs out. You can also end it manually by pressing A, but we don't want to do that because it just barely gets us high enough anyway. Ideally, you'll be able to make it on top of this ledge with just one wall jump off there. Let me just go up the ladder and head over here. Sometimes items will drop from the spider underneath this floor when you go through the door. Kind of a weird quirk. Most of the time it doesn't matter. If you've got as much health as I've got now, don't pick up any health that drops. You shouldn't need it. But if you've got less than this, because you took some hits, wouldn't be a bad idea to grab some. I think I have at least one to spare, even in my current state, but if you're not confident, grab any health you can get. Doesn't really matter how we hit this door. It will affect the fight, but in my experience, neither way is especially superior. This is another deceptively difficult fight. The actual method of attacking him is really basic, but actually doing it optimally is quite rare. As the fight starts, we're just going to buffer a full jump to the right. That way we can trigger his attack as early as possible, which only happens when we're close to him. And then we're just going to stand underneath and attack repeatedly with the triple rod. In order to get as much damage as possible, you need a good rhythm. But it's a lot more finicky than a lot of the other ways we attack bosses. I can't really give too much advice on it. I think it's something you kind of just need to get a feel for. Generally, the way I do it is like a few rapid presses of the buttons, the attack button, and then a pause while I wait for my attack to end, and then I repeat. You also want to time your attacks so they come out right as either you get out of being damaged or the boss becomes vulnerable. And you want to be ending the fight during this second cycle while he's spitting fire. Having him around here after the first cycle is pretty good. You can get a lot more damage than that in the first cycle, but 2 cycling is definitely possible with this much damage. If you're low on health, when you enter this fight, you'll have to dodge some of the attacks. When he spits fire on you, it does a lot more damage than when he hits you with his yellow face, so generally it's better to dodge one of the fire attacks if you need to dodge anything to stay alive. Let's suppose we don't get the 2 cycle. If our rhythm's kind of slow. And he goes into this attack. And he starts that cycle really low, so you can get good hits on him right as his weakness opens up. But if you're really far behind and you need to dodge this attack, just go away and then come back. Though, even if you do have to do the 3rd cycle, it's pretty rare for you to have to dodge that attack, I've found. If that is a problem for you, then you should really reevaluate the attack rhythm you're doing, because there's something wrong. I just barely got a 46 on this stage once during a theory task, so that is possible, but it would require really smooth movement and an immaculate boss fight. 47 is even pretty rare in my experience, just because there's so much variance in how long that boss fight takes. The difference between a perfect rhythm and a pretty good one is really substantial in how much damage you're doing.